Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We all have that dream of that one day retiring and taking whatever assets we have and living off of that. And it all sounds good until you talk to a professional, and then the plan isn't that great because we're not financial experts. We're going to talk about that today, your future, planning for it, your assets, how it all works, how to support yourself after you officially retire. And he works with people all the time, especially those that are nearing the end of their career or even have passed that and have retired. Financial planner, wealth management expert, Nicholas Pihl is back with us. Welcome back, Nicholas. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. And I'm sure a lot of times you hear these stories from people, what they're going to do when they retire, how they're going to use whatever money they have. I'm sure it comes up a lot.
Yeah, and it's I mean, one of my favorite things is seeing people finally have like the time and freedom to do what they've always wanted to do.
Sure.
A client, they signed on a couple of years and they've become one of my favorite clients since, because they just like within a couple of weeks of retiring, they were on the road in their RV, taking some like really great long trips and just spending months on the road, seeing the country, and they're just super happy with it. So I love to see when people have stuff that they have in mind. And
but I guess also with that comes false sense of security. Like we all think we have a plan, and we should. But it doesn't mean it's the best plan. Like give an example of maybe something that you've heard from somebody thinking that maybe this plan might work.
That couple that I referred to, they're actually like pretty well prepared. They had like, they had their ducks pretty well in a row. We were able to take care of a few extra risks, make sure, and they were really just hands off on the portfolio. They had, they happened to have saved enough for retirement. Maybe my printer's going. So they happened to have been in a good situation for their own retirement, which I can really encourage people to get in touch with an advisor like well before retirement, because sometimes I meet people and they're like 65 and they're like, hey, I want to retire. I'm like, great. Like, what's your plan? And they're like, I have no plan. Like, they haven't saved any money. They haven't like put themselves in a position to do what they want to do. And I was like, okay, like that's going to be tough to do. Just living off Social Security. It's not enough for most people. So those are just like the worst conversations to have. And then other times people are, okay, so here's like a weird conversation I had with a guy. He was 65 and his full expectation was that he was only going to live 20 years. So in his head, it was like, okay, well, if I'm 65 now, I'm going to die at 85. Why don't I just spend 5% of my money every year, keep it all? This thing's been a nuisance.
What is that's pinging there?
It's just my printer running in the background here.
Is it running by itself?
Yeah. All right. We're back.
I have to share it. This is, we're live. There's no script here.
A little real life happening. Yeah.
My printer will just out of nowhere start printing, and it'll be just a line of crazy characters. And sometimes it'll spit out like 10 pieces of paper. And it's like, I'm either somebody's playing a joke on me or it's possessed. And I can't even understand what the characters mean. Right. I don't know if yours is doing that.
Yeah. You could be receiving like transmissions from the other dimension.
Yeah, there's a deep message there. I haven't figured it out yet. You know what the message is? If you're 65, don't expect to spend what you have and live past,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
time.
So yeah, I guess I should be more specific with what this guy's, what's maybe suboptimal about this guy's plan.
Okay.
So he was figuring like, okay, I've got, call it $1 million, for round numbers.
Sure.
Why don't I just spend 50 grand a year, or about, what is that? 4,000 a month. Between now and the day I die, Social Security, it'll just be gravy once he starts taking that at like 70. And, then, burn it down to zero and, die happy, I guess, die broke. It's kind of what I figured. Cause he didn't want to have to worry about the markets. He didn't want to have to worry about hiring a planner. All these things, he just kind of, it's like a more of an attempt just to avoid really thinking about his situation and like finances, because I think it really stressed him out, and so he was going for this like super like oversimplified plan, right? Um,
In
anyway,
theory,
yeah, yeah,
Nicholas, it sounds reasonable
yeah,
because depending on where you live in the country, but maybe if you're by yourself, you could probably do 50K when you're older. And he's got 1 million. So if you do the math on that
yeah,
every year, and he's thinking he's going to live to about 85. So in theory, it sounds okay. And we didn't even talk
right,
about Social Security yet. So I don't know if we
right. And
figured that
that's
in.
that's kind of what he was figuring too. Like,
That's
yeah, that's his
that's
thing.
gravy on top. Padding. When
Yeah.
that check comes, whatever it is. Why is this whole thing not a good idea?
There are a few reasons. Um, well, probably the first one that came to my mind was really inflation. So
Okay.
between now and the day he dies, he's going to lose about 45% of his purchasing power if you have 3% inflation. So if inflation's higher than that, you
Hmm.
lose way more of your purchasing power. So
Wow.
that means, for every you get the same dollar amount coming in roughly, but you're buying half as much groceries, half as much gas. You're taking trips that are half as nice or taking them half as often, whatever your thing is. You're doing half of all of it. Um, and so that's a problem, right? You go from being relatively comfortable and affluent early in retirement to being, uh, for lack of a better word, kind of destitute towards the end there.
Hmm.
Which is not, I wouldn't sign like my parents up for that. I wouldn't sign my grandparents up for that.
Wait,
Friends,
I
anyone I
just
cared about, I wouldn't wish that on them.
and that's what makes you different because you're a people person and you really do care about everybody. With what we're talking about here and his plan for the future, does he own his own home and is it paid off?
It is paid off. Yeah.
Okay, so
So he's
there's,
been super conservative his whole life, just no debt, chunked away into his 401k for 25 years or so.
so we're ahead of the
Um,
game there because he
so
doesn't
on the
have to pay for.
preparation side, he did a pretty good job, I think. Yeah. And um, having a mortgage in retirement is not the end of the world. You definitely should talk to a planner if you're thinking of like paying it off, or if you do have a mortgage, just um, there are a few decisions to make there that are really important to get right. And it all depends on your other assets, what interest rate you've got, how long you've got left on the mortgage, how old you are. Those are like a lot of things, right? Um,
Hmm,
but yeah, like all else equal, it makes your life a little easier and simpler not to have a mortgage going into retirement. And
sure.
so he did a good job there.
But that being said,
Yeah,
that $1 million that he's sitting on with the with not having to spend it on housing, it even sounds like it's an okay plan. It really does.
yeah,
Because now you're not chunking away. I don't know, 2 grand, three, whatever it is per month. I have to rent.
to
My
your
gosh. So
yeah,
that
to a
said,
mortgage, and you're not saving anymore for retirement either at that time.
exactly.
So
But you're
there's
saying that the
yeah,
inflation rate by the time we get 10 years in,
right.
15 in, it's going to crush you even with 50K a year.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of whatever your spending is, whatever your dollar amount that you can like take out of your portfolio, that's each dollar is buying half as much,
Wow.
and that's assuming 3% inflation for 20 years, right? The other problem is, so he's assuming he's going to die like at exactly 85. People don't die like that, right? I talked to
Right.
some young people who are like, oh, when I get to be that age, just shoot me. And I've never talked to an 85-year-old who's like, yes, today is the day I would like you to shoot me. You know, like
Exactly.
take me out to the
Right.
pasture
Right.
and like end my life. Mostly people want to keep living because they find reasons to be happy. Like both my grandmothers lived into their mid 90s, and both of them said that was some of the best years of their lives
Wow.
because I think it's you have a certain wisdom, you learn what's important. Stuff doesn't bother you. You every year is so precious. If you've got 3 years, you're not going to waste a lot of time
Sure.
worrying about what other people are saying and doing and ways to be annoyed.
you've figured out who you are. By that time,
By
you've
that,
got it.
just in time to die, like you know who you are. Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes that does happen. Hopefully it's sooner. But
Yeah.
wow, even that 50K, I am kind of surprised, and
Yeah. So
I'm not
it's
a
like,
numbers
yeah,
guy.
25 grand in today's dollars. So living on $2,000 a month, that's tougher. Doing that when you've got pretty high healthcare bills. So that's the other reason I said, okay, this
Mm,
is this is what you got to think about in those last few years of your life. Um, you're probably not going to be in the same health that you are as a 65-year-old. You probably
mm,
have some medications that you need to pay for. You might need more routine doctor's visits. You're going to have higher healthcare costs almost no matter what. Like you'd be a rare person who's not on like a few more prescriptions or like coming into the doctor more often, especially in like the last couple of years of life. Like some astonishing percentage of our like our as a nation, our healthcare spending, uh, it, it's something like 20 or 30%. It's just in like the last couple of years of life.
wow.
So like factor that into your plan, right? On top of which, if you're otherwise well, maybe you're looking at a point where you've got just like a little difficulty getting in the store, buying your own groceries, cooking, doing laundry, taking care of the house. It's just you don't have the energy, you don't have the
Mm,
if you're mentally sharp, you might just not have the physical energy. If you're not mentally sharp, like if you've got some issues with dementia or Alzheimer's creeping in, it's even harder to take care of yourself, getting bills paid, like the whole thing. So there is a pretty high likelihood for a lot of people that they'll need some help with the last few years of their life, just taking care of themselves, taking care of their home and all of that.
do you
And that's
think,
expensive. Yeah.
based on this guy, and I'm glad we're using this as an example because
Yeah.
it's, good baseline
Yeah.
for all these retirement plans.
Right.
In a perfect situation, and I didn't even think about the health stuff and all of that. And this is why you're great at what you do because you look at the future. Let's just say his health is fantastic. He
Right.
lives to 85, and maybe
Yeah.
that's the end. Just
Yeah.
saying.
And who has fantastic health at 85 that
I'm
dies
just
at
saying. I'm
85,
just
you
saying.
know? Okay. Yeah.
I go completely. All of that there owns his own home. All of these pieces there.
Yeah.
Perfect scenario. It really is. Not real, but perfect scenario. Is it the 3% inflation rate every year that's going to make that 50K a year not work?
Yeah. Just by its, that alone makes the plan not work.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, at the end of that, so you've got if you go to like an assisted care facility, that can be 50 to $60,000 a year, depending where you are in the United States. I'm sure if you're on like the island of Manhattan, it's like four times that or something, just ludicrous. Or even downtown Portland, it can be, $8,000 a month is not crazy, but four 4,000 a month for like a lot of the rest of the country is probably not like a bad number to have in mind.
Right.
And that's just assisted living. So if you're in like a nursing home, so you're getting like medical care, not just people helping you with meals, doing your laundry, and like making sure you haven't like fallen on the floor,
Right.
can't get up. That's much more expensive. That's closer to like $100,000 a year. So the last couple of years of your life, you need like a lot of cash to be able to cover these expenses. Otherwise, it falls to like your kids, and yeah, that can be a strain situation.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
So here we are with Joe Doe. We don't know his name. He's
Yeah.
65. He's got about 1 million in
Yeah.
assets. Is that some of that is in investments? Is some of that liquid?
So this is him just saying like, I want to keep it all in cash. I don't trust the stock market. Like,
Okay.
I just want to. He's like real paranoid kind of guy. Wanting to do his whole like
Fair enough.
DIY thing,
So
and
we
so I'm trying to talk to him like, okay, why is that why is just keeping it all in cash like not a viable option? He like so basically we're getting to like, why do you need to invest this money? Like you need to take some risk with it. There's such a thing as too much risk, and that's like a whole separate thing. But you need some growth to have that money last you throughout your retirement. even a 20-year retirement with a guy who set himself up great. In all these other ways, like we've talked about, like this guy has done most of the right things for most of his life. And that you would think that that would solve all of your problems indefinitely, but it doesn't necessarily. And so this guy hadn't really given a lot of thought to like the end of life care question. He didn't have a trust
Well,
or will drawn up either.
I gotta tell you, this is all kind of scary because all the pieces here seem like they're good ones. So Joe has that about 1 million. He's 65. He's in front of you right now, and we need a plan for the future. What are we going to do? Marry somebody rich.
Yeah, just become a gold digger, I guess. Marry
Right,
some like
right, exactly.
wealthy
Yeah.
90-year-old
Get
woman.
on senior singles dating app right away and start looking.
Yeah. I mean, people sharing expense their like finances generally does like help a lot. Like that's one thing that two people living in a house instead of like two people living in two houses, like that's a huge amount of money that's available for like generating income and interest for them to live on. So I mean, I know you're kind of kidding, but you shouldn't do it for financial reasons, obviously. Just like that's a terrible reason to get
No,
married
yeah,
and right.
100%.
But it does, yeah, there
Yes,
are
there is
benefits
strength
to
in
financially.
numbers, right? But let's just say he's doing his own thing now, solo.
Yeah.
Uh, what would you suggest to him to make his future more solid?
There's a few things. I mean, fundamentally, I mean, at that point, I'm saying, dude, just hire me and like, well, because this is beyond like a 3-minute conversation, right? Like, if solving these problems is going to take some time and some work, and keeping the plan on track is going to take some time and work, like throughout your retirement. Like, the reason I'm set up the way I am is because these things do take some like oversight and administration along the way to make sure that like what you're doing with your investments is good, right? Like there's
Okay.
not okay, so I'm not going to give advice for him like here, just do this and you're good for the next 30 years, right? Because who knows what the next 30 years. Some adjustments are probably going to be needed. But in general, so
Well,
it in
how about this? How about
yeah,
this? What is the most important thing that you would suggest? And again, it's a moving target, it's an
sure.
evolution, it's a beginning of a relationship with you to work with him. But are we looking at taking that million or half of it and investing it properly to grow some more
Yeah.
assets? Okay.
Yeah. So that is fundamental. Like there's just not a really way around that. Like he does need to get some growth on that money.
Okay.
What the right portfolio is for him, I don't know if I could really give general advice on that, but or at least not in like a couple of minutes.
Sure.
Um,
And then again, I just want to, and I totally understand what you mean. This is all hypothetical and just a starting point. And we're illustrating here today a lot of the things that we think will work for our future may not or probably isn't going to work. So in terms of him taking some of that money and investing it, then we got to worry about risk. So, you know,
right,
1 million in 20 years from even 20 years from right now, not really a lot when you add it all up and look at, inflation and everything.
right. Um, so there's a couple of things, right? Like, so he needs interest coming off the money to live off of. He needs some income. He needs the money to grow a little bit, to replace whatever he's taking out of the portfolio. So that's one.
Okay.
The other key piece is that he needs that money to grow so that as he's taking out that fixed percentage of the portfolio, like the sustainable percentage that he can take out,
Mhm.
so that he can live 30 years and not be completely broke at 85 and spend 10 years being broke.
Right.
Um, that money needs to grow faster than the rate of inflation. Uh,
Okay.
so whatever that is, like that 3%, like, okay, we need let's say he wants to take out 5% of his portfolio each year, which isn't like a super crazy assumption. So he needs like 5% to replace that money, and then he needs another 3% just to keep up with inflation. So he needs about 8% returns throughout retirement. And Social Security will mitigate that somewhat. So he might be able to get away with like 5 or 6% returns.
Okay.
But that means he's going to have to own some stocks. And for him in a situation like the it's the which risk are you going to take? Are you going to take the risk of like some volatility in the short run, or are you going to take the risk of losing half your purchasing power over the long run? And so you have to, whatever his preference is, and balancing that a little bit with like, okay, here's the reality of the situation. Here's what you might not be thinking about. We'll get to some like that conversation will get to a point where I'm recommending, hey, here's what we got to invest your money in. Here's why. Here's why it's a good fit for you. Here's why if the market does drop like 50%, you're still going to be okay. We don't have to touch that money, like that particular money that's in the market. We don't have to touch that for a good long time. It's going to have time to come back. It's going to have time to grow. We're going to like make sure all of your needs are met along the way. And like that's really the implementation of a good financial plan is making that actually happen.
Based on all of these numbers and a assumed rate of inflation at 85, is this doable, or are you looking at this even, at 65, he's got about $1 million. Are you looking at it being like, that's going to be
I think he's in good shape, frankly.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. I think he could be like, if this guy, and this is based on a real conversation I had, by the way, this person is real.
Absolutely.
But if you implement a few of these recommendations, earmark some money for that long-term care, because that could be a lump sum of a couple $100,000 to $500,000
right
in today's dollars. If you get dementia, people with that diagnosis keep living for a long time, even if they're not like there. So that's really that would be like a really expensive end of life care scenario.
Sure.
So earmark some money for that. Earmark some money to like grow and keep up with inflation. Like walk through all of these things. Make sure that like Social Security is included in this plan. Medicare and healthcare costs are factored into the plan. So there's some assumption that healthcare costs are going up over the course of the plan, which over the last 20 years, healthcare costs have grown at like twice the rate of general inflation. It's been closer to like 4 or 5% as opposed to like 1%, like 1 to 2.5%.
Well, fortunately, I would assume in many states, based on his income, not even the assets, that he would qualify for state subsidized healthcare or very reduced rates for it. So I guess that would be working in his favor in terms of the healthcare.
Yeah. So that's another thing. Dealing with the taxes on all of this money, like making yeah, when I work with clients, one of the things I do is I look at, okay, like what are the thresholds that we want to keep your income underneath, that are realistic, right? Like if someone's spending 200 grand a year, they're not going to qualify for any of these things, any of those types of programs. They're probably going to be paying like the maximum.
Of course.
Yeah, like Medicare premiums, they're going to be paying the maximum, like health insurance premium, like they're going to be like the higher tax brackets. There's just, but if they're in that lower range, like, hey, you've got some money in a tax-free account, you've got some money in a taxable account, you've got money in your old 401k. We have these like different places where we can optimize where we're taking the money from to keep that tax bill lower so they qualify for those benefits like reduced healthcare premiums or health insurance premiums.
Wow, I'm glad we talked about this today because it's an eye-opener. One would think,
I know. I mean, I wish I could give like a half-hour crash course that tells you what to actually do about all of this stuff. But the reality is just everyone's so unique in their own situation that it merits a conversation at least.
For sure. And that's also a lot of us have different tolerances for risk. So he made me say, yeah, let's go for it. Take half, 500K and let's, be aggressive for a little while. Others, be careful. Lots of variables to start that conversation with any of this. And it doesn't have to be, somebody who is 65 or close to it. Could be somebody younger. You deal with and work with everybody. How do we find you, Nicholas?
Yeah. So I've got a website, pihlfinancialplanning.com, PIHL financialplanning.com. You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook as well. I'm on Twitter a little bit. I try to post useful stuff there, but mostly it's liking videos and stuff that I find funny or entertaining. So it's probably not the place to go for me. For financial planning anyway.
Gotcha.
If you're into like
You know
bird
what?
watching and spirituality quotes, that's
Yeah,
good.
but you know what? That gets a better feel for you because you're very people driven. You know, you have a heart. You really care about somebody's future. Doesn't matter what age they are. And this is all the stuff that's, you know, out of our wheelhouse. I admit, probably shouldn't. I'm financially illiterate. This does not. I
You
just
and everybody else. Yeah.
It's I'm a creative guy, or I just want to live life. I don't want to worry about the numbers.
Also, I mean, how boring would the world be if everyone was a financial planner, right?
You said it, not me.
It would be boring. We need artists, we need creatives, we need
exactly.
engineers, we need
And
like we need everyone, right? Like
we do. We need
whatever your
financial
gifts are.
planners. We desperately need financial planners, especially with the way things are today and inflation increasingly getting higher. Nicholas, thank you so much for being here and all the insight, and look forward next time we get together.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, it's always a treat being on your show, and glad to be here and hopefully help somebody. So
I think I know we did. I know we did because there are a lot of people contemplating the future. All right. Thanks again. We'll talk soon.
All right. Yeah. Talk to you later.
Come right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.